Hundreds of fish died in a pond near the Washington Monument.
This is the second major fish kill to happen in that pond at Constitution Gardens since 2013. But take a walk through Constitution Gardens and you'll find plenty of views that will give most photographers pause. Count Andrea Puentes as one of them. But she didn't stop here today just to take a picture of the Washington Monument. More so, what was in the pond nearby.
Definitely not as clean and pretty as it usually looks.
On top of the water, she found a messy stew of algae and dead fish, while other passerby noticed something else in the air.
The smell was not pleasant at all.
Smells really bad.
Something fishy is definitely going on in Eastchester. People were complaining of a rotting fish smell coming from the Hutchinson River.
From a distance, it looks like your average river, but go anywhere near it, you can see it and smell it.
It was stomach turning. I don't really like it.
The smell of dead fish making Bronxites sick to their stomachs.
It stinks like crazy. It's disgusting.
People who work in the area say the stench was the strongest on Thursday when they first noticed it, but we did spot some surviving fish swimming around. It's unclear how or why many died, but
a fish-killing parasite is now prompting emergency measures along the Yellowstone River.
Nearly 200 miles of the popular Yellowstone River is closed to the public, as thousands of fish have gone belly up in an unprecedented way. Officials in Montana suspect the cause is a human-spread parasitic disease. Fishing, rafting, swimming and other water-based recreational activities were banned for an undetermined amount of time as of Friday morning.
Last month went down in the record books as the hottest July ever recorded. And it's not just the high temperatures that have affected Mainers.
Rainfall for much of the state has been way below normal. That's left riverbeds dry, lakes dramatically lower, and many people with dry wells. Drought conditions have hit farmers especially hard.
In Turner, the drought has hit hard. The 30-foot well the Abruzzi family relies on for their personal use here at the Double Z farm has dried up. They are now forced to borrow from their livestock.
I've never seen anything like it.
Chris Abruzzi bought his farm, now called Double Z, in 2010. He has 4 wells on his land, enough water for his cows, horses, sheep, and his family. That is, until the water stopped flowing.
Yes, I can see the pump.
They've been out of water for nearly
about 2.5 weeks,
which means doing things the old-fashioned way.
The one we're currently living on, that's actually connected to the sheep house.
They now use the water from these buckets to do just about everything.
Showering it and doing dishes.
Who knew that water was going to be so precious to you?
Exactly.
It seems, at least Chris,
we are taking laundry to our neighbor's house.
Isn't just getting accustomed to it.
The sheep house, it's about 100 feet from the house.
You're really strong now.
You know, I farm strong. Hi, Days.
Crews sawed up and hauled away what's left of this huge oak tree that came down in Wellesley with a crash.
And of course there was no wind, no electrical storm, no anything last night. It was as still as could be.
A few days earlier in Reading, a tree fell on a house, and in Salem, New Hampshire, this falling tree just missed hitting a woman in her car.
You can see these branches right here are so brittle they just snap right off.
Arborist Rolf Briggs says not just this summer, but rather 4 years of dry weather have been starving trees and making them vulnerable to insects and disease.
And we're going to see a lot of insects and diseases this year that we hadn't seen in many, many years that are because of the drought.
In fact, the state's most recent forest survey shows since last year, the number of acres of damaged trees has more than tripled, mainly because of gypsy moths.
Report out says that a mega quake has a 99.9% chance of striking Los Angeles before, here's a date now folks, before April 2008. That is a claim coming out of NASA. Sean Martin for the Express UK is reporting that a huge earthquake is 99.9% likely to hit Los Angeles within the next 2 years, according to scientists. They say that the group's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena have warned that a series of mini tremors beneath the surface of the City of Angels have caused pressure to build up. They say that in 2014, a 5.1 magnitude earthquake hit the town of La Habra in Southern California, and the experts from NASA say that there is still some leftover strain from that, which will almost definitely hit before April of 2018.
New tonight, a deadly bacteria is plaguing cattle herds across Oklahoma, and it's costing ranchers a lot of money. It's a disease that's very common in the summer when horseflies and ticks are the most active. One local vet tells News on 6 reporter Tess Monty this summer it's close to epidemic levels.
It's a way of life.
This land has been in Kimberly King's family since before statehood.
My grandfather, great-grandfather, father, they all raised cattle.
Now King is following in their footsteps, raising about 40 head of cattle on her Bixby ranch.
I want to do the best I can for them and put out the best product to the consumer that I can.
But this summer has been a rough one. King has already lost 3 cows to a bloodborne bacteria called anaplasmosis.
These are actually mothers in production. So not only do you lose the mother, you lose a potential calf production.
King's loss could cost her upward of $6,000. Begg's veterinarian Dr. Gary Bynum says the bacteria is transmitted primarily by horsefly and tick bites. The parasites affect the red blood cells and cause cattle to become anemic.
Without treatment, they will die. And sometimes they get so anemic that they don't get enough blood to their brain and they kind of go crazy and they'll charge you.
If caught early enough, there are treatments that can save the cattle, and ranchers can use things like minerals and vaccines to try and keep the animals from getting sick in the first place. Bynum has seen more than 30 fatal cases already, but with symptoms taking as many as 8 weeks to show up, the worst may be yet to come.
So we will see this disease from now all the way into fall.
Which means ranchers will be watching closely to keep their herds safe.
திருவள்ளூர் அருகே மர்ம காய்ச்சலால் கடந்த ஒரு வாரத்தில் 4 சிறுவர்கள் உயிரிழந்த சம்பவம் அப்பகுதியில் அதிர்ச்சியும்
Infection spread by mosquitoes has rapidly made its way from coastal Victoria to Melbourne suburbs. It's called the Buruli ulcer and causes horrific open wounds that can lead to limb amputations. And a warning, some people may find images in this story confronting.
Jan Smith says the last few months have been a living nightmare.
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. No, it's a horrible experience.
The 72-year-old has a gaping wound on her leg called a Buruli ulcer.
It's actually 1,000 bacteria behind the scab, eating away, forming gangrene.
It all started when the grandmother was bitten by a mosquito while gardening in Rosebud. Fast forward only a few months, and her husband couldn't look at her leg without retching.
He said, you can't see it, but from this angle I can see into your bone.
Well, it's typically on exposed parts of their body, for example, the backs of their calves, their ankles and their elbows.
In recent years, cases of the skin condition have jumped. In 2005, there was 17. But last year, that skyrocketed to 106. Experts believe it's a disease that originated in possums, which has been transmitted to humans through mosquitoes.
If the diagnosis is left too long, the amount of damaged skin can be quite significant.
The infection was first documented in Bairnsdale during the 1940s. It spread to Phillip Island, Western Port and the Mornington Peninsula. But now, it's reached as close to the city as Hampton.
In Florida, the Centers for Disease Control say mosquitoes infected with the Zika virus have spread to Miami Beach, but spraying the area could be difficult because of the high-rise buildings and strong winds. Officials say 5 people in the Miami Beach zone have been infected. That brings the total number of infections in 2 areas of the city to 36.
Good morning. There is yet another travel advisory from the CDC, this one telling pregnant women to avoid the Zika zone here on Miami Beach. It's the second travel advisory. You might remember the first was west of here in the Wynwood area. This is only the second time the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued a travel advisory inside the continental U.S. The Zika cases here on Miami Beach involve 3 men and 2 women. 2 of the 5 people are still here on the beach. 1 person has gone back to El Paso, Texas, the other to New York, and a 3rd person has returned to Taiwan.
A gang in search of food broke into a zoo at night and butchered a horse for food, it has been reported. The shocking incident in Caracas has been held up as an example of the desperation of the Venezuelan people who are enduring a severe economic crisis. With looting and food shortages commonplace, It's been reported that several people forced their way into Curacao Zoo in search of food.
I just caught a bit of that stuff. What are people showing up and doing? All they could tell us was that people are showing up and dying.
In August 2012, U.S. President Barack Obama declared that using chemical weapons was a red line that neither the Assad regime nor others on the ground in Syria should cross. But a year later, the rebel-held areas in Ghouta were bombed with sarin gas. Hundreds of people, including women and children, were killed, sparking an international outcry and renewed debate on the use of chemical weapons. Following the attack, the U.S. Congress voted on whether to conduct airstrikes on regime positions, but no approval was given. In September of 2013, the U.S. and Russia reached a deal to rid the Syrian regime of its chemical weapons stockpile within 6 months. It took a year to reach that target, but doubts were raised about the regime's transparency. And less than a year later, inspectors said they found traces of sarin and VX nerve gas at a site which the regime had not declared.
Turkish Prime Minister says that his country is willing to accept a role for President Bashar al-Assad during the transition period in Syria. Binali Yildirim says that Turkey is willing to become more of a regional player in regards to Syria over the next 6 months. He added that Ankara will not allow the country to be ethnically divided and prefers a system in which all ethnic groups are represented.
Leader of the Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah has pledged victory in any future war with Israel. In an interview with Lebanon's Al-Manar TV, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said the advanced military capabilities would help the resistance group triumph in the event of a war.
We got a lot of pictures. This is pretty awesome. This is a shelf cloud over Louisiana. Now it's a low, horizontal, kind of rolled shaped cloud. People were more than happy to run out and take a quick picture, which we always hashtag shelfie. And dramatic scenes from these shelfies in the sky. They're the leading edge of the outflow from a thunderstorm, and they often bring gusty winds. Sometimes it's more bark than bite, right? You get a stiff breeze and then nothing, but then other times the whole storm moves in. You get some big, heavy downpours and even stronger winds. But quite impressive. Many pictures came in, Steph. People wanted to know what these were, so glad that we can tell them. It's a shelf cloud.
Flood watches and warnings are posted across the Deep South this weekend. A large section of Texas is actually at risk, as is southern Louisiana. This past week, historic floods in Louisiana killed at least 13 people. Entire neighborhoods are devastated. A massive cleanup is underway. Manuel Bajorquez is in the flood zone.
Volunteers are helping Kathy Edmonston clear out what the flood destroyed. She's lived here almost 30 years.
What have you lost here? Virtually everything. Virtually everything. All of what was inside of my house is gone.
Her home had never been hit by floods. This time, 2 feet of water rushed in.
We're going to be here for as long as we need to be.
Edmonston was one of hundreds of flood victims at this community meeting in Sanamon, outside Baton Rouge, learning how to apply for federal aid. FEMA says the number of people who have registered for assistance in the 20 affected parishes has jumped to more than 103,000, a one-week total the agency has not seen since Superstorm Sandy in 2012. 40,000 homes were damaged, and the water reached areas where many thought flood insurance was not necessary.
Get him.
Even those who helped in the rescue effort were not spared the devastation. National Guard Sergeant Justin Smith rescued a man from the Amite River last week, only to later find his own home had flooded. Now it is his family that needs help. Much like Kathy Edmonston, who says before additional federal aid arrives, the support from neighbors near and far is the only thing getting her through.
Okay. All right, love you. Love you. Bye. Bye. These people that are here gutting my house, these are all volunteers from Katrina. I'm so grateful to them.
In flooded neighborhoods across Louisiana, as the water goes down, the debris piles up. FEMA says it has already distributed more than $34 million in aid. President Obama is set to visit the area on Tuesday.
Something unexplained is happening in our nation's capital, and it has both Democrats and Republicans alarmed. A mysterious slime is defacing several memorials. Mark Albert investigates the case of the strange black blob.
Standing sentry along the National Mall is a monument and memorials to towering figures in American history: Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. But generations after they cemented their legacies, something is tarnishing their image.
This is the slime. This is the slime.
A black mass is spreading like a disease over the marble of Washington, D.C. Abraham Lincoln was the great emancipator, but so far the National Park Service hasn't been able to free the 16th President's Memorial from the slime.
Between Tennessee and Ohio, on the edge, it sticks out.
Over there, yeah.
You see that real dark spot, and it's starting to creep downward a little bit.
Yeah. Mike Litters with the Park Service says the substance is actually a biofilm made up of 1,000 different bacteria and mold and other species that adhere themselves to stone surfaces.
It's called slime, but when you touch it, it's dry. It doesn't come off in your fingers. Correct. And again, the slime, the secretions, the sugary strands, all microscopic, nothing that we're going to pick up with the naked eye or even be able to glean from a touch. Which makes it so much harder to clean. Correct.
Litters says experts don't know where the biofilm came from or how to get rid of it. It's also now in Arlington National Cemetery and on the Washington Monument. But it's by far the worst at the Jefferson Memorial, where the white dome is now covered in patches of black. The Park Service went public with the slime mystery this month after people kept confusing the blackness with dirt and complained loudly that the agency wasn't keeping the memorials clean. Park Service has now posted signs letting people know about the battle and has received at least 100 cleaning tips from the public, including Jane Weber of Florida, who suggested water.
It needs to come off.
You don't like the sight of it?
No, it's kind of ugly. We got to clean it.
Judy Jacob, a conservator at the Park Service in New York, has helped assemble a global team of scientists, microbiologists, and architects who are trying to create a slime antidote.
We don't even know yet if the biofilm, aside from an aesthetic problem, is causing damage to the marble or if it's actually protecting the marble.
It must be frustrating not to know exactly where this came from and not to know how to get rid of it. It is very frustrating, and it's one of those things that the more we look into it, the more questions we ask, the more we come up with all sorts of theories and ideas. But to date, there is no known permanent solution to get rid of biofilm. And it's growing faster each year. Thomas Jefferson may have helped propel the redcoats, but so far there's been no luck stopping the blackcoats, now invading the nation's capital.